Hey, it's Kisha here with Defending the Early Years podcast. We'll be focusing on amplifying the voices of early childhood educators, advocates, and all of those who love children. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Defending the Early Years podcast. Today, I am super excited to talk with the Renee Dinnerstein about her wonderful work around choice time. Hi, Renee.
Hey, how are you? Nice to be
doing wonderfully.
Nice to be here.
I am so excited to learn a little bit more about what it is that you do. Please tell us who you are and what your passion is.
So I was a New York City public school teacher for many years. And then I was a teacher director of a public like early childhood annex for another public school. And after that, I went to work at the Department of Education, just leading early childhood workshops and curriculum writing. And then I retired, and that was in 2003. And since then, I've been doing consulting work in different schools. In 2015, I was approached by an editor at Heinemann who knew my work and knew of my classroom. And she said, Renee, you've been doing all this work in choice time in your classroom. We need a book about that. And I literally spent the next year working on writing that book. It came out in 2016. And I've gotten good response to it because I tried to make it both to give a really good background in the research that was done around play and inquiry, but also to give teachers something very solid that they could look at, like, what does this mean and how can I actually do this? So now when I go into schools, as like I've been just started going into a school for the first time, and with working with teachers there. And so what we're doing there, for example, is we're setting up sort of a lab choice time room. And there is a wonderful teacher who's going to be taking groups of children in there so that teachers in the school can see what happens when children are playing, when the environment, we say guided play, and I don't like that word because it sounds so, I don't know, we need a new word for it. But where the play environments or exploration environments are set up by the teacher, and then children choose to go to different areas. But when they're there, the teacher doesn't have anything to really do with what they decide to do in those areas. If the play is up to them. We can come in and we can observe a lot of observation, and we can make some, maybe like ask questions that might bring them to some other level of exploration based on what we're noticing. But it's their decision how they're going to do this exploration. So if that's clear, I don't know. It's very different.
Oh, that's absolutely clear. It's absolutely clear.
In a lot of classrooms, now I'm mainly working, well, pre-K through second grade mainly, right? And mainly kindergarten, first and second grade, and sometimes pre-K. And what the schools are doing, and a lot of the public schools are doing in kindergarten, first grade, and maybe second grade, is they have what they call literacy centers. And that's confusing the teachers. Like, well, we're doing this, Well, literacy centers, I think they mainly come out of the work of Gay Sue Pinnell, but there might be blocks there might be art materials there might be some kind of game there, but there's a task, all right? There's a task that children have so that teachers can assess how well they're doing these tasks at these literacy centers. And what I say to the teachers is there is no task. There's no task. Sometimes I would challenge children, like, I wonder if you might come up with some new way of exploring these shells in the science center that we've actually never really thought about. Do they do that? Yes, maybe. No, maybe. And it's interesting to see what they ended up doing there. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going in with teachers.
And what has been the feedback that you've had from teachers that you've worked with? What are they seeing? What are
Yeah,
they seeing out of the children?
generally, I think very positive. Actually, when I go into classrooms, I often will put the cart before the horse, because I feel like it's so important to have the room set up well so that children can understand what's in these different areas and can be more independent. And that doesn't always happen at the beginning. I just spent a day with three new public school teachers, lovely, lovely teachers. But the rooms were, it didn't make sense, like the blocks were in a place where people would trip over it. The dramatic play area I couldn't figure it out where it was. And the art area, the materials were not accessible and clear to the children. So we really worked on the setup of the room first. And sometimes that's difficult for teachers when I come in, as it was last week when I went in, because they've spent all this time at the beginning of the year setting up their classroom, and here I come in and say, let's try it and see what happens when we change it around. But so when I left the school, I had the feeling that there was a lot of grumbling about me. But then I got 3 emails from these 3 teachers saying it is like night and day. The children know where to go, and the room seems so clear. I can understand it, etc. So yeah, so sometimes I think it's really important to really start with, like, why are we setting it up differently? What is the reason that you have the blocks by the door, and I'm asking you to find a nice area that's out of the way and reset it up and give them more space. um, so I think generally the feedback is good. I mean, these poor public school teachers are working under some very tough constraints, depending upon the school that they're in.
Yes. So my question to you is, who is inviting you in? Are you being invited by principals? Who is the catalyst behind having someone come in and make some change?
It's generally the principal or the assistant principal, or sometimes a teacher might have gone to a workshop of mine and comes back and speaks to them and said, I really wish we could work with Renee. But it's generally the principal. In the school that I'm working in, which is in upstate New York, it's actually the superintendent who called me in, because I worked with him when he was the director of a school in Hong Kong. All right. And so now that he came back to the States, he remembered the work that I did with his teachers there, came into the school. He felt like, well, we need to make some changes here. And he asked me if I'd come once a month. I go for 2 days once a month to work with the teachers.
Wonderful, wonderful. That is really inspiring to know that principals and superintendents and teachers are seeing that there needs to be some change and actually finding ways to do that. What would you say is one of the most your fondest memories of a success story that you've had working in a school?
All right, so I could give you something very specific. So the school that I went to this past week, I was first there, I can't remember, it's 5 or 6 years ago, but my first day was in October, all right, which is hard for teachers because, and I went into this classroom and I observed what was going on. The teacher was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, but the room made no sense. It made absolutely no sense. And choice time, all right, was about 20 to 30 minutes at the end of the day. Nothing, children just kind of went places. The teacher was either putting homework in folders, which homework in kindergarten kind of gives me a bad feeling anyway, or doing guided reading with the group during this time, which that's another thing that yeah, I'm not so happy with. But anyway, I spoke with her about the room, and I made some strong suggestions about ways that she could change it. Then I found when I came back the next time, it was like a different room. It was completely different. And she did say, she said the day after I changed it, it was like magic. You know, the children just were different. But she said, I stayed until 9 o'clock after you left with my student teacher and really cursed you because I had spent so much time setting up this classroom, and now I have to redo the whole thing. But now her room is like a model room for how to have how to have as appropriate a classroom as you can in a public school with all of the other constraints. You know, she now does her choice time or play or whatever you want to call it. She calls it choice time too, at the beginning of the day, and for an hour at the beginning of the day. She's doing some really interesting inquiry studies with her class, and integrating it with the choice time that they have. She is definitely a major success story, and her classroom has become a model classroom for me. In fact, Beverly Falk, the head of early childhood at the City College in New York, she did a film about her class. You know, it's so wonderful, and it's on her website. Um,
Wow. Well, what would you say if you had to give a tip? You're only one lovely lady and you can't be everywhere. So if you could give a tip to our listeners about one or two things that they can do right now to make their room more conducive to this type of play, what are some tips that you could give?
I think first of all, as I said, to set up the room, and in my book, if they have my book, I'm very, I think, very clear about the way to set up certain centers. I think of the classroom, right, as a laboratory for children, a laboratory for learning, you know, and I also think that the classroom has a voice, and so the teacher should step back and say, what is it that my classroom is saying to children? All right, is this exactly what I want it to say? And if it's not saying that, what kind of changes can I make? And the other thing is really to take a deep breath and have time, give time. You know, children need time. You know, I feel like when they go to a center, if they go to a choice time center, right? I feel like the first maybe 10 minutes or so I call it a mucking around time, where they don't really have a particular focus. They're trying to figure things out, et cetera, et cetera. But then they have this time where they have come to a focus in what they're doing, whether it's a dramatic play or whether it's something they're doing with Legos, whatever it is, they have a focus there. And they need time for that, you know, and then they need time to come down from it. So, you know, I think that teachers are usually forced to rush through the day. And I love the Reggio Emilia saying that we use a roadmap and not a timetable. And I try to share that with teachers, right? You know, we need to have a roadmap for the day and for the week and for the month, but not a timetable for it.
So, speaking of teachers, what would you say their role is during this time? What is, if I was a teacher and my children were exploring their hour of choice time, where
Mm.
would I be and what would I be doing?
Well, the first thing is you cannot be everywhere. It doesn't happen that you're everywhere. And that's one thing that teachers worry about. Well, if I'm here, like at where children are making Play-Doh, then I don't know what's happening in the block area, you know, or I don't know what's happening in the science area. And you can't be everywhere at once. And so you have to like let loose a little bit and say, maybe I want to see how the children are using the Play-Doh, or, you know, I want to see what's actually happening at this table. And so I think it's important to like spend time observing, recording. I mean, when I was in my classroom, we did not have iPhones for recording what's going on. I think it's great, you know, that we can do that. So to take photos, to take videos, to write down things that you're hearing. and then to kind of in some way bring it back to the children. We learn from everything. I've learned from seeing clips of Anji play and how they not just observe, but they bring it back into the classroom. They project, they have the children come up to a projection and we've been doing that, in some of the classrooms I'm working in. And that's wonderful, because it kind of brings things back and it allows children to process what was happening. And also for the other children to learn how to ask questions, to listen and ask questions and to make comments that build on what somebody else said.
For me, I know that I learned so much about who the children are through their play. Are you getting any feedback about the relationships being stronger within these classrooms because of this?
Generally, yes. This is a very challenging year for teachers. In fact, I just got a text message this morning from a wonderful teacher in a public school in Brooklyn, New York, and she does incredible things with her class. And she said, how can I get a sense of community when children are sitting 3 feet away from somebody else and they can't play together? So it's a very super challenging year for teachers. Unfortunately, I hear too many stories about teachers going home and crying, teachers who have written to me, and wonderful teachers who said, I don't think I can do this anymore. I can't stand what's happening in the classroom. Hopefully this will pass. I'm hoping it will pass, but it definitely, especially in public schools where the teachers are being really wide, they have to measure, that it's at least 3 feet away, etc. So it is definitely a challenge. But
so how has that changed the choice time?
It has changed it drastically. And the teachers at this point cannot really, and the principal too, quite truthfully, cannot figure out what are we allowed to do based on the CBC instructions. Can 2 children play together? The school that I'm working in upstate New York, they now let the children play together in groups of 2s, for 15 minutes each day, no more, because they said science says that they can only do this for 15 minutes. I don't see the science of that. I don't know, but maybe that's the case. The school nurse has, told them, like, I made some changes when I was there, and then she came and put the veto on it, and they moved things back again. So truthfully, Kisha, I really do feel, aside from feeling that for the children, I feel very sad for the teachers, what they're going through. But
I hear you.
But I think during normal times, yes, I think the teachers really have given me feedback about the different way that children are learning how to, I want how to play together. One of the things that I said is don't jump into arguments. Mm-hmm. Let them work it out. I mean, if they're going to like physically hurt each other, yeah, go in. But can I give you another story? This was in a first grade classroom, all right? And there was one particular child, it was a challenging class for sure, but there was one particular child who had a history of violence, all right? History of violent actions, all right? But he loved choice time. And they were doing a study of the New York City subway system. And he was working with 3 other boys using a big carton, building a toll booth, as they have in the subway. And they were having an argument. He had a scissor in his hand, all right? And they're arguing, all right? And the teacher said she was ready to jump in, but she heard my voice in her head. So she just waited and waited. And then she heard him say, put the scissor down and say, we've got to stop this argument because otherwise we won't have any chance to play, So, yeah.
Yes. And that was the kind of story that I just needed to hear because in my work, that's what I see. I see that when children have that shared goal in play, they are so flexible. They're willing to hear the perspective of another because they have the shared goal of keeping that play going, keeping the learning going, keeping the joy going.
Right. They don't know they're learning, but we know they are.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. So I heard you say something about having the play shift from the end of the day to the beginning of the day and having that be a benefit. Can you tell us a little bit why that is a benefit?
I think that if we want children to have like a richer, more constructive way of interacting with materials and playing together, we can't leave it to the time. We can't have them do all of this, what I think is inappropriate kind of academic work all day, which is so tiring for children, and really maybe pushes some children in ways that they are not ready to be pushed, and then expect them to really focus at the end of the day. We can't expect that. What I do when I go into a school to work, I speak to the principal first, and I tell the principal that if you want me to work here, there are certain conditions that I put forth. One is that the teachers have enough time to have a really good choice time, and it's got to be like at least 50 minutes. All right, it has to be at least 50 minutes. All right, that's a first condition. The second condition is that their choice time has to be at a prime time during the day. I love having it at the beginning of the day. I understand that all principals will not allow that, but it can't be at the end of the day. Maybe it's the period before lunchtime, the period right after lunchtime, but not at the end of the day. The third condition is that teachers are allowed to bring their children for outdoor play for a good stretch of time. Not just the outdoor play that the children do after lunch, which makes them rush through lunch and not actually eat their lunch because they want to get out to play, but a real time during the day, because I think that teachers learn things that they don't know about children by watching them in the classroom if they watch them playing outdoors. So what I say is, if you don't feel like you can support these three conditions, then I'm not the person who's going to make changes in your school. All right. If you want me to make changes, you need to back me on these three. So that's what limited school.
Yes, yes.
Right.
But it's good that you put that out there in the front, because you're right. There are some parameters that have to happen in order for this wonderful idea to work. Like, you gotta, if you're gonna do it, you have to do it right. I love how the focus is on the environment and changing that, and then watching how the children change because of that environmental shift. I want to hear so much more, and thank you so much for talking to us. Can you please give us an idea of, one, where we can find your book, how we can get in contact with you, and how schools can find you? Because the more schools that know about this work, the better for us all.
Well, my book, you could always buy it through Heinemann. Just go to their website, Heinemann Publishers, or Amazon has it. It's called Choice Time. How to, I'm forgetting the name of the book, but it's Choice Time. And I also have a blog, all right, which is investigating choice time.
Yep.
Inquiry, exploration, and play. It's www.investigatingchoicetime.com. And you can find a lot. I have videos on it. I have classroom projects. I have some things that I'm describing. And this past year, since I wasn't getting into classrooms, I didn't feel like I had the authentic voice to tell teachers what they might be doing. I just didn't feel authentic about it. And so what I ended up doing was a whole series of recorded conversations with different people on different topics that related usually to play. And so that's what I did this past year. And it was fun doing that. I got to speak to people I would not have ordinarily spoken with.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. I am excited to learn a lot more about choice time and to implement in my classrooms. And hopefully as well, I have a big passion for trickling this up, not just preschool, kindergarten, first grade. I want to trickle it on up to third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. Why can't we go all the way up?
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I totally agree with you. And in New York, we have a wonderful congressman, Jamal Bowman.
Yes.
He really speaks up for that.
And that was another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. Defending the Early Years works to support the rights and needs of young children nationally. Learn more at DEY.org. Pay us a visit, sign up for our newsletter, or connect with us on social media. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.